Suddenly, she froze, hearing a rustling sound from behind her. She didn't dare turn around. Instead, she crouched low, trying to make herself as small as possible, pressing her back against the rough bark of a tree. Her heart pounded in her chest as she strained her ears, waiting. The rustling grew louder, closer. Whatever was coming wasn't trying to hide. It was moving deliberately, perhaps even stalking her. She had to make a choice, run again or fight. Her eyes darted around, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. Her options were limited. A jagged rock lay nearby, but it was too small to be of much use. She could only rely on her speed, her agility, and her knowledge of how to survive in hostile environments. But even with all of that, she still had no idea what kind of creature was approaching. The fear of the unknown gnawed at her insides. A low growl echoed through the trees, vibrating the air around her. Her breath hitched as the sound came closer. It was a predator, and it was fast. The alien girl's instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. The pain in her leg flared up again, making her feel vulnerable and slow. She needed to act, and quickly. The growl grew louder, and then a shape emerged from the shadows. It was tall, its muscles rippling under its thick fur. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto hers as it bared its teeth, showing off rows of sharp fangs. She had never seen anything like it before. It was a mix between a predator and something smarter. This was no ordinary beast. Without thinking, she lunged toward the rock, grabbing it in both hands. She swung it with all her strength, aiming for the creature's head. But the beast was faster. It ducked just in time, the rock missing by inches, and in retaliation, it lunged forward, its massive claws clashing through the air. The girl barely had time to react as the claws raked across her shoulder, the sharp tips slicing through her suit, grazing her skin. A wave of pain flooded her senses, but she forced herself to ignore it. She had no time for weakness. She ducked under the next swing of the creature's claws, her heart hammering in her chest. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made everything feel like it was happening in slow motion. She couldn't win in a straight fight. She knew that. The alien girl had been trained to outsmart her enemies, not to overpower them. She had to be clever, use her environment to her advantage. Her mind raced as she darted sideways, moving in between the trees. The creature growled again, frustration clear in its voice. It was faster than her, but it didn't have her agility or her ability to think on its level. As the predator charged at her again, she ducked behind a large tree, using it as cover. The creature barreled into the tree with a crash, shaking the ground beneath her feet. The alien girl took advantage of the momentary disorientation, sprinting to the left, weaving through the underbrush to confuse her pursuer. For a moment, everything went silent. The creature's growls had stopped, and she thought she might have lost it. But then she heard the snap of a branch behind her, too close for comfort. She turned, spotting the beast again. Its eyes locked on her as it began to chase. It had caught her scent. Her mind raced for an escape. There had to be something she could use. She ran as fast as she could, hearing the creature growling louder and louder as it gained on her. The alien girl's lungs burned with each breath, and her legs ached. She had to find a place to hide. She couldn't outrun it forever. Ahead, she spotted a small cave tucked into the side of a hill. It was barely visible, hidden by thick vines and foliage. She pushed herself harder, her body screaming in protest as she closed the distance between her and the cave. She could hear the predator's heavy breathing, feel its presence getting closer. With a burst of energy, she dove toward the cave, slipping inside just as the creature lunged at her. Its claws scraped against the entrance, missing her by inches. The alien girl scrambled further into the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She pressed her back against the cold stone of the cave wall, trying to slow her breathing. The creature's growls echoed through the cave entrance, and for a moment, she thought it might follow her inside. But after what felt like an eternity, the sounds began to fade. It was leaving. Slowly, Carefully, the alien girl eased her way further into the cave, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The predator wasn't following. She had escaped, at least for now. The door in front of her began to slide open slowly, revealing a large, circular chamber beyond. The air in the room felt cooler, and the hum was louder now, almost deafening. As she stepped inside, her eyes were immediately drawn to the center of the room. There, illuminated by an eerie light, was a massive cylindrical object. It looked like an old machine, but it pulsed with a strange energy, the lights flickering as though it were coming back to life. The alien girl felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of recognition. This machine, whatever it was the key to everything. This was no ordinary facility. It was a relic, something ancient that had been waiting for centuries, perhaps millennia, for someone to activate it. But why? Why had this place been hidden? And why had it been left on Earth, of all places? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound from the shadows of the room. A low, growling hum that sent shivers up her spine. She spun around, her weapon drawn, but saw nothing. Yet she could feel it. Something was there, something powerful and dangerous. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The machine pulsed harder now, its lights flickering faster, as if reacting to her presence. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the speakers above her. It was a deep, resonant sound, and though it was a language she didn't recognize, it sent a chill through her. The words were like a warning, a statement of intent. She couldn't fully translate them, but the tone was unmistakable. This place wasn't just a forgotten outpost. It was a fortress, and she had just triggered something far beyond her comprehension. As the voice died down, the machine at the center of the room whirred to life. The lights intensified, and a deep, unnatural vibration filled the air. She could feel it in her chest, the energy building rapidly. The ground shook beneath her feet, and she staggered back, her heart racing. Before she could react, a panel on the side of the machine slid open with a loud hiss, revealing a compartment. Inside was a small metallic orb, its surface smooth and glowing faintly. It hummed with an energy that felt familiar yet alien. It was the source of the facility's power, and as the girl's fingers brushed against it, a surge of energy shot through her body. Her vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, everything around her had changed. The room was no longer empty. Shadows moved along the walls, and she could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing behind her. Her breath caught in her throat, and she spun around, eyes wide. The shadows were taking form, shapes, figures, silhouettes of beings unlike any she had seen before. They were tall, their forms elongated and fluid, their faces hidden behind masks of darkness. Their eyes glowed with a cold, menacing light. The alien girl's heart pounded in her chest. She had unknowingly activated something that had been dormant for far too long. And now, it seemed, she wasn't alone. The figures moved toward her with deliberate, slow steps. The girl's mind raced, her body tensing, ready to defend herself. She was a long way from home, trapped in a world that wanted her dead. But now, she had uncovered something that might just give her the power she needed to survive, if she could figure out how to use it before it was too late. The lights in the room flickered once more, and as the figures closed in, the alien girl realized something far more terrifying. The true nightmare had only just begun. The alien girl's mind raced with thoughts of escape. Could she rebuild her ship, repair the communication systems? She had no idea what kind of technology Earth had, or whether her ship's systems would even work in the presence of this strange world's electromagnetic fields. Everything she had learned as an explorer told her that this world was anything but ordinary, and the crash was far from the only danger lurking in the shadows. Despite the ever-present anxiety gnawing at her, she needed a plan. Survival wasn't just about avoiding the creature or finding food. It was about figuring out how to survive long enough to leave this place, to get back to the stars. The alien girl couldn't afford to be trapped here forever. She had a mission, a purpose. She was more than just an exile on a hostile world. The next morning, she ventured out of the shack, determined to gather more supplies. Her leg had healed somewhat, though it still ached when she moved too quickly. But she knew she had to keep pushing forward. Earth's dangers weren't going to wait for her to be fully healed. She made her way through the forest, staying in the shadows, careful not to make any noise that might draw attention to her. Every tree seemed like a potential threat. Every rustling sound a reminder that she wasn't alone on this planet. The air was thick with the scent of the earth, and the low hum of the wild creatures that filled the landscape seemed to echo in her mind. As she walked deeper into the forest, she heard something different, a faint sound, like the soft whine of a mechanical engine. Her heart skipped a beat. Had she finally found something that could help her? A piece of her crashed ship. She quickened her pace, her eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the source of the noise. She wasn't sure what she expected, but what she found wasn't a piece of her ship. Instead, she stumbled upon a small clearing where a strange device stood, a rusted, haphazard construction, but undeniably technological in nature. It looked like some kind of primitive sensor or scanning device, its metal frame twisted and bent from years of neglect. It didn't look like something from Earth, at least not from the technology she knew. She cautiously approached it, her fingers brushing against the surface. The device came to life in an instant. A low hum filled the air, and the screen flickered on. It displayed a series of symbols and coordinates, some of them familiar to her, others completely alien. It wasn't much, but it was a piece of hope, a sign that not everything on this planet was trying to kill her. Whoever had left this device here must have been here before her, and the idea that there were others, perhaps survivors, perhaps explorers, on Earth made her pulse quicken. But as she examined the device, she realized something that made her blood run cold. The coordinates on the screen didn't point to anything she recognized. In fact, they pointed to a place deeper in the forest, far from the area she had been exploring. Could it be a trap? Or was there something more to this? The girl felt both cautious and curious. Could there be others like her stranded here on Earth? Or was this device the last remnants of another being's failed attempt at survival? She made the decision then. She had to investigate. If there was even a chance that someone had left this device as a signal, she would follow the coordinates and try to find out more. Maybe this would lead her to more survivors, or maybe it would lead to something even more dangerous. Either way, it was her best shot at understanding what had happened on this planet, and ultimately, finding a way to escape. The journey to the coordinates was long, the terrain growing increasingly difficult the farther she ventured. The trees grew thicker, the air heavier. The sounds of the forest grew louder, more ominous. But there was no turning back now. She couldn't afford to be scared. She had come too far to turn back, to stay hidden in the shack. She needed answers. That night, she set up a trap. It was crude, but effective. A pit covered with branches and leaves, disguised to look like the ground around it. If the creature was as predictable as she thought, it would fall for it. But she didn't expect the creature to be as clever as it was. As dusk fell and the shadows grew longer, she watched from her hiding place, her breath shallow and her body tense. She could hear it before she saw it, the heavy thud of its paws, the sound of its claws scraping against the earth. Her heart raced in anticipation. Every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to act at the moment's notice. And then there it was. The creature emerged from the trees, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. It sniffed the air, its glowing eyes scanning the area. For a moment, it seemed uncertain, as though it was searching for something. The alien girl held her breath, praying that the trap would work. The creature took a few more steps forward, its claws digging into the earth. It was close, too close. And then, just as it moved onto the leaves covering the pit, it stopped. Its head swung to the side, and its eyes locked onto hers. For a split second, the alien girl froze. How had it known? The creature's growl was low and menacing as it advanced toward her, its eyes never leaving her face. Panic surged within her, but she didn't let it control her. She couldn't afford to be afraid. Not now. She had to think. The creature lunged at her with terrifying speed, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. She had no time to think, no time to act. She ducked, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive jaws snapping shut where her head had been just moments before. She rolled to the side, scrambling to her feet, her injured leg threatening to give way beneath her. But the alien girl wasn't going to die here. Not like this. She grabbed a thick branch from the ground and swung it with all her might at the creature's head. It connected with a sickening crack, and for a moment, the creature staggered back, disoriented. She didn't wait for it to recover. She ran, limping, but fast enough to put distance between herself and the beast. The night was thick with the sound of pursuit, the creature's growls echoing through the trees. The alien girl could feel her strength waning, but she pushed herself harder. She had to find safety. She had to escape. Ahead, she saw something large and dark. A building. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing in sight. Her heart skipped a beat as she made her way toward it, praying that it wasn't another trap. She didn't care at this point. She had to get away. She reached the building, only to find that it was an abandoned structure, a shack, dilapidated and covered in vines. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but it was a shelter, and that was all that mattered. She slipped inside, breathing heavily, her body shaking from the adrenaline and the pain. The creature didn't follow her inside. For now, she was safe, but she knew the danger wasn't over. Earth was a death world, and she was trapped on it. She had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep surviving. Each day, each moment, was a battle, and she would fight until the very end. The next few days felt like a blur of exhaustion and tension. The alien girl had taken refuge in the abandoned shack, but she knew it was only a temporary solution. The creature was still out there, and although it hadn't found her again yet, she couldn't let her guard down. The safety of the shack was an illusion. This world had already proven time and again that it would not let her rest for long. She spent the next few hours scouring the shack for anything useful, but there wasn't much. The place was falling apart, the walls crumbling under the weight of time, and the floor covered in dust and debris. The roof was missing large sections, and the windows were shattered, but it offered a brief respite from the constant threat of the outside world. She carefully blocked up the largest openings with whatever she could find, trying to make the space as secure as possible. Though the shack wasn't much, it was the first place she'd found on Earth that felt like it could offer her any kind of shelter. She was learning more about the planet each day, but her knowledge was still so limited. She didn't know how long the creature would take to regroup and come for her again, and she didn't have the luxury of time to wait around. Without thinking, the alien girl bolted, sprinting through the forest as fast as her injured leg would allow. The adrenaline surged through her body, her senses sharpened to a razor's edge. The predator was fast, but she was faster. Her species had evolved in harsher conditions than Earth could offer, and she knew how to push her body to its limits. Still, the terrain was unfamiliar, and she could feel the predator gaining on her. Every branch that whipped past her seemed like it might trip her, every rock threatening to make her fall. But she couldn't afford to slow down. She could hear the growls behind her, the heavy breathing of the creature closing in. It was hunting her, and it wouldn't stop until it caught her. As she ran, the girl noticed something ahead, a narrow gap between two large rocks. It was small, but it might offer just enough shelter to hide. She aimed for it, her foot catching on a low branch. With a sharp yelp, she stumbled, but managed to regain her balance just in time. She reached the gap and squeezed herself into the narrow space, her body pressed against the cold stone. She held her breath, praying the predator wouldn't see her. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her own breathing and the distant calls of other creatures. She waited tense, her muscles aching from the sprint. Then she heard it again, the growl. Close, very close. The predator was right outside. She could hear it sniffing the air, its claws scratching against the ground. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest as she remained perfectly still. The predator was getting closer, and she feared it would sense her. She couldn't fight it, not without her ship's weaponry. She needed to survive, not fight. If she could just wait it out, it might give up. The seconds stretched into eternity as she held her breath, her eyes wide in the darkness of her hiding spot. The predator's sniffing grew louder, the sound of its claws scraping against stone sending a chill down her spine. She could feel the heat of its breath on the other side of the rocks, could almost see its glowing eyes peering through the shadows. Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the predator stepped away. The growling ceased, and the creature moved off into the distance. She let out a slow, shaky breath, her body relaxing slightly, though her heart still raced. It had been too close, much too close. The alien girl waited for a moment, ensuring that the predator was truly gone. When she was certain, she slowly backed out of her hiding spot, her movements cautious. Her eyes scanned the surrounding area for any more threats, but the forest seemed eerily still now. Whatever had been hunting her had moved on. For the moment, she was safe. But the girl knew this wasn't over. Earth was filled with dangers, both seen and unseen. And she had barely scratched the surface. She couldn't keep hiding forever. She would need to find food, shelter, and most importantly, a way off this cursed planet. She limped forward again, her mind set on finding safety. Each step was a reminder of how much she had to learn about this hostile world. The alien girl had been prepared for a reconnaissance mission, not a fight for survival. But Earth wasn't giving her any other choice. This world might be her worst nightmare, but she wasn't going to let it be the end of her. With a determined breath, she continued on. The night was coming, and she had to find shelter before the dangers of this world came out in full force. She knew she couldn't trust anyone or anything on Earth, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going to give up without a fight. The alien girl's survival instincts kicked in as the forest around her darkened, the air growing cooler with the setting sun. She had only just started to grasp the dangerous complexity of Earth, and already the world seemed to be pushing back against her every move. Her leg throbbed with every step, but there was no time to rest. Nightfall meant the creatures of this Deathworld would be even more active, more dangerous. She had to find a safe place to wait out the night, or she wouldn't live to see another day. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she stumbled through the dense undergrowth, scanning the darkening forest for any sign of shelter. She had read about Earth's wilderness before, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw, terrifying reality of it. The trees loomed like giants, their twisted branches clawing at the sky, while strange sounds echoed from all directions. There was no telling what kind of predator lurked just beyond her sight. She reached the base of the cliff, looking for a way to slip between the rocks, but there was no obvious entrance. She felt a surge of panic. She couldn't be trapped here. The creature was close, so close. She turned, backing into the rocks, and finally, after a moment of desperation, she spotted a narrow crack in the stone. It wasn't much, but it was her only chance. With all the speed she could muster, she dove into the gap, squeezing herself through the tight space. Her heart pounded in her chest as she forced her body into the narrow opening, her muscles screaming in protest. She made it through just as the creature emerged, its massive head brushing against the rocks. It sniffed the air, growling in frustration as it searched for her. The alien girl held her breath, pressing herself flat against the cold stone. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she waited. The predator sniffed again, circling around, but it didn't seem to understand where she had gone. It sniffed the crack in the rock, then let out a growl of frustration and padded away. She waited in the dark for what felt like an eternity, not daring to move. The creature's growls faded into the distance, and only then did she allow herself to exhale. She was safe, this time. But that safety was fleeting. Earth was not going to give her a moment's rest. It was a place where survival meant everything, and every step could be your last. She couldn't rely on luck forever. As she pulled herself from the crack and surveyed the area, she knew one thing for certain. If she didn't get off this planet soon, she would not survive much longer. The alien who had sent her here had no idea what Earth was truly like. It was a death world, and she had to find a way to conquer it, or it would conquer her. The next few days passed in a blur of survival. The alien girl moved carefully, picking her way through the dense forest, constantly aware of her surroundings. Every rustle in the trees, every crack in the underbrush sent her heart racing. She had learned to trust her instincts, but even that was becoming harder as Earth's creatures continued to surprise her with their unpredictability. Her leg was still injured, and it slowed her down more than she would have liked. She had wrapped it with makeshift bandages, using some of the materials she had scavenged from her ship's wreckage, but it wasn't healing as quickly as she needed. The constant movement, the need to stay ahead of whatever was hunting her, made it impossible for her to truly rest. But she couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. The alien girl had quickly realized that Earth's dangers weren't just the predators that stalked the shadows. The environment itself was as hostile as any creature she had encountered. The plants seemed to be alive with their own malice, their vines capable of constricting around her if she wasn't careful. The very air itself felt thick and oppressive, as though the planet was trying to suffocate her. It was a death world, and it had made its point. Survival here was an endless battle. Her mind was always working, always calculating her next move. She had found more water, this time from a small, clear pond tucked away in the forest, and she'd spent hours gathering what little food she could find. The fruits were strange, unlike anything she had seen before, their colors vibrant, and their textures alien to her, but they kept her alive. The small animals that roamed the forest were difficult to catch, but with time, she had figured out how to trap them. Each day was a small victory, but also a constant reminder of how fragile she was in this world. But it wasn't just the food or the shelter that occupied her thoughts. She kept wondering what had happened to the rest of her crew. The crash had been sudden, violent, and she had been separated from them almost immediately. She didn't know if they had survived, if they were even alive. Every time she thought about them, a wave of guilt washed over her. Had she been the reason they were stranded here too? She had to push those thoughts away. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here, not now. After 3 days of restless wandering, her worst fears were confirmed. The creature from the first night was still hunting her. She had seen its tracks more than once, and she could hear its growls echoing through the trees. It was getting closer. She had no idea how the beast had found her so quickly, but she knew it wouldn't stop until she was its prey. She had made a mistake, staying in the same area for too long. Earth wasn't a place for complacency, and she had allowed herself to grow too comfortable. She ran until her legs felt like they would give out, until her breath came in ragged gasps. The forest blurred around her as she pushed her body to its limits. She had to keep moving. There was no other option. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way. She yelped as she fell into a deep hole, her body crashing into the dirt and rocks at the bottom. The fall was painful, and the impact left her disoriented. She lay there for a moment, trying to gather her bearings, her ears ringing from the fall. Her mind raced. She had to move. She couldn't stay here, not with whatever was hunting her above. She slowly stood, using the walls of the hole for support. She was exhausted, battered, and hurt, but she couldn't give up. Not yet. She had to survive. The alien girl climbed out of the hole, using her remaining strength to pull herself up. The pain in her leg was unbearable, but she ignored it. Every second counted. She couldn't waste time. Her senses remained sharp as she began to move once more, though slower now. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig, had her on edge. She was deep in the unknown. Earth had become her worst nightmare. The predators, the wild creatures, the harsh landscape, all of it was overwhelming. She had no way of knowing what would come next, what dangers awaited her in the shadows of this alien world. She only knew one thing for sure. If she didn't find shelter soon, she wouldn't survive the night. The alien girl continued through the forest, her every movement calculated, every decision made for survival. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. Earth's Deathworld had already shown her just how quickly things could go wrong. But she wasn't ready to give up. She would survive. She had to. Time was running out, and the danger was real. With each step, the alien girl realized that Earth, a world so far away from her own, was no place for the weak. And she, too, would have to become something else to survive. Something far stronger than she had ever imagined. The alien girl stumbled through the dense forest, her heart pounding in her chest as the sounds of creatures hunting filled the air. Every step she took was a reminder of how vulnerable she was. Her leg throbbed with pain, but she couldn't afford to stop. Not now. The forest seemed alive, constantly shifting with the movement of animals and the rustling of leaves. This was no ordinary world. Earth was unlike anything she had expected. A death world, where everything seemed intent on hunting or being hunted. The sunlight that pierced through the canopy above was both a blessing and a curse. While it illuminated her path, it also made her an easy target. She had learned that quickly. The creatures of this world were far more dangerous than anything she had encountered in her travels through the galaxy. The atmosphere itself felt thick, oppressive, as if the very air was conspiring against her. Her thoughts raced as she tried to form a plan. The ship had crashed hours ago, and she had no idea where she was, or even if anyone from her species would come to her aid. The technology in her ship had been damaged beyond repair. There was no way to contact home, and no way to defend herself properly. Her only weapon was her intellect, her alien physiology, and the skills she had honed in her training. But right now, none of that felt like enough. She hobbled forward, trying to ignore the intense pain in her leg. The fall had left her wounded, but there was no time to rest. Her mind shifted back to the crash site. Her ship was wrecked, beyond anything she could fix. She would have to rely on what Earth could offer. The problem was, Earth was an unpredictable world, one that could kill her if she didn't play her cards right. The alien girl paused as a strange sound reached her ears, something heavy moving through the forest. She crouched low, her body instinctively preparing for whatever threat might be coming. The sound grew louder, and then it stopped. A sharp inhale of breath echoed from the trees. She could feel the tension in the air, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. It was a predator. She had no doubt about it. The scent in the air had changed. The familiar, yet alien, smell of wet leaves mixed with something far more dangerous. She didn't know what it was, but her instincts screamed at her to hide. She scanned the area around her for any place to take cover, but the dense underbrush was thick with branches and vines. There was nowhere to go. The predator made its move. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow flicker, moving swiftly through the trees. It was large, its movements smooth and practiced. She had no idea what it was, but it looked like it could easily overpower her. Panic bubbled inside her, but she pushed it down. She had survived this long because she kept her head in stressful situations. She needed to do the same now. She collapsed against the wall, her breath ragged, her body sore from the chase. The pain in her shoulder was sharp, but she didn't have the time to deal with it. She had survived this encounter, but she knew this was only the beginning. The creatures of Earth were relentless, and if she didn't figure out how to get off this world soon, it might be her last. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself rest, but only for a moment. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, and she had to be ready. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. Her survival depended on it. The following morning, the alien girl awoke to the harsh light filtering through the cave's entrance. The events of the previous night were still fresh in her mind, the terrifying encounter with the creature, the chase, and her narrow escape. She hadn't expected Earth's wildlife to be so deadly, so aggressive. Every step she took on this planet seemed to push her closer to death, and yet she hadn't given up. The strength within her pushed her forward. She stood slowly, testing her injured shoulder. The pain was dull, but still sharp enough to remind her of her vulnerability. She couldn't afford another fight like the one last night. As she moved deeper into the cave, her mind began to work, analyzing her situation. She was stranded on a hostile planet with no way of contacting her people. Her ship had crashed, the wreckage scattered across this wild, untamed landscape. She had nothing but her wits, her skills, and the hope that somehow she could survive long enough to find a way out. The sound of birds calling in the distance reminded her that this world was teeming with life, life that didn't care whether she was from another galaxy or not. Earth wasn't going to show her mercy. She had to fight to survive. Her first priority was to secure water. Her throat felt dry, and her body demanded nourishment. She had already explored the cave's immediate surroundings, but it hadn't yielded anything useful. The forest outside seemed vast and endless, but she knew she couldn't afford to wander aimlessly. She had to plan. Earth wasn't going to wait for her to figure things out. With a deep breath, she stepped outside. The world around her looked different in the daylight, more menacing, but also more familiar. The forest was alive with motion, creatures darting in and out of the underbrush. Birds with sharp, predatory eyes watched her from the trees, and small furry animals scurried through the leaves. The alien girl had never been one to shy away from danger. But this place was different. Every leaf, every sound, every shadow could be hiding something that could kill her. As she walked, she kept her senses sharp. She wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. She had learned quickly that the creatures of this planet were not to be underestimated. The rocks and trees may have looked inviting, but they could be deadly. Each step she took had to be calculated. After what seemed like hours of wandering through the dense forest, she finally found a stream, a narrow trickle of clear water flowing through the rocks. She knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink. The cool water was a relief, washing away some of the dust and dryness from her throat. She had taken a few sips when the faint rustling of leaves interrupted the peaceful sound of the stream. She froze, her body instantly alert. The rustling wasn't the wind. It was something moving through the forest. She dropped her hands into the water, slowly backing away from the stream, her eyes darting around. She was learning fast, and right now, every sound was a potential threat. A low growl echoed through the trees, unmistakable and familiar. It was the creature from last night. She had no idea how it had tracked her, but it was back. Her heart began to race, and her pulse quickened. There was no time to think. She had to move. The alien girl sprinted toward the trees, her injured leg still aching but bearable. She heard the beast behind her, its growl growing louder as it closed the gap. She couldn't outrun it, not with her injury, not with the terrain. She needed to hide, to find shelter, or she wouldn't survive a second encounter. Ahead, a cliff face rose, jagged and steep. There was no way she could climb it in her condition, but the space between the cliff and the forest might provide some cover. She veered toward it, her eyes scanning the area for any way to lose the creature. The sound of its paws crashing through the underbrush was deafening. It was gaining on her. Hours later, the alien girl arrived at the coordinates. What she found was a strange structure. A metal door embedded in the side of a cliff, surrounded by overgrown vines and thick moss. It was a bunker, or perhaps some sort of underground facility. The door was old, its surface covered in rust, but it looked solid. She ran her fingers over the controls, but there was no response. Then, as if the planet itself was mocking her, the ground trembled beneath her feet. Her stomach lurched. She had no idea what this meant, whether it was an earthquake, some sort of creature, or something even worse. But she knew one thing. She had to get inside, and she had to do it quickly. She didn't know what dangers lay inside that bunker, but standing out here in the open was far more dangerous. She pulled on the rusted door, gritting her teeth as she put all her strength into it. With a loud groan, the door began to creak open. She slipped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was stale, but there was a faint hum coming from deeper within, as though the facility had been dormant for a long time, but wasn't completely abandoned. Her pulse quickened. What she found inside could be the answer to everything, or it could lead to her final moments. The alien girl steadied her breath, her mind racing. This was it. She had no choice now but to press forward and face whatever awaited her. The moment the door closed behind her, the alien girl felt a sense of claustrophobic silence envelop her. The faint hum she had heard outside was louder now, but it was muffled, as if the facility was sealed off from the outside world. She stood in a narrow, dimly lit hallway, the air musty but not completely stagnant. The walls were covered in strange, foreign symbols that were both familiar and unsettling. Some part of her recognized the patterns, but they weren't from any civilization she had encountered before. The chill creeping down her spine told her this place was not just an abandoned outpost. It was something far older, something far more important. As she moved down the corridor, her eyes scanning for any signs of life or movement, the ground beneath her feet felt strangely firm, almost too solid for an abandoned structure. Her hand hovered over the weapon she had scavenged from her wrecked ship, but she hadn't had to use it yet. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, though. Every sound in the stillness seemed to echo back at her, and every flicker of shadow made her muscles tense. The hallway twisted and turned, growing narrower the deeper she went. Her mind raced with possibilities. What kind of beings had built this place, and why had they left it behind? There were no signs of recent activity, yet the humming seemed constant, as if some force was keeping the facility alive, waiting for someone to reactivate it. At the end of the corridor, she found a large door. Unlike the rusted exterior of the entrance, this one was intact, polished, and locked tight. It was reinforced, built with a level of technology far beyond anything Earth's primitive societies could have created. She could feel it in her bones, the energy thrumming through the door, as though it were waiting for her to interact with it. Her fingers found a console embedded in the wall beside it. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if activating it would trigger some kind of alarm or mechanism. But the desperation within her pushed aside her doubts. This could be her only chance to uncover the mysteries of this planet, to understand who had built this and why. With a deep breath, she pressed a few buttons on the console. The screen lit up with a flash of symbols, none of which she recognized. Then, the screen blinked and displayed a message in a language she could understand. A series of coordinates followed by a single word: HFY. The alien girl's ship tore through Earth's atmosphere with a fiery roar. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her mission was simple: observe and report. But the unexpected storm she encountered had damaged her vessel beyond repair. As the ship descended into the unknown, she braced herself for impact, her heart racing as the strange blue planet loomed closer. The crash was brutal. Her body slammed against the seat restraints, and for a moment, everything went black. When she regained consciousness, her head throbbed, and her body felt like it had been crushed under 1,000 tons of weight. Slowly, she opened her eyes, squinting at the bright sunlight that streamed through the cracked windows of the ship. Her alien eyes, accustomed to the dim lights of her home planet, struggled to adjust. She glanced around, feeling an unsettling sense of vulnerability. The forest outside the ship was dense, green, and unfamiliar. No stars, no familiar landscapes, just wild, untamed nature. She stumbled to her feet, her limbs stiff and sore from the crash. Her body was stronger than any human's, but the injuries were still painful. Her first instinct was to gather her things, to assess the damage to her ship and see if she could still communicate with her home planet. But when she tried to stand and move toward the control panel, a sudden pain shot through her leg. She collapsed back onto the ground with a gasp, realizing that her leg was broken. The alien girl clenched her jaw, trying to ignore the pain. She had no choice but to keep going. With effort, she dragged herself toward the control panel. Her fingers brushed over the shattered screens, flickering in and out of life. She could feel the weight of the situation settling in. She was stranded, alone, on a hostile world. Earth, a planet she had studied from afar, was not the peaceful haven she had expected. It was a death world, filled with dangers she had never imagined. The ship's systems were beyond repair, and there was no way to send a distress signal. She had no way of knowing if anyone on her planet even knew she was here. But one thing was clear: she had to survive. She had no choice but to leave the ship and venture into the forest. She pulled herself to her feet again, this time more cautiously. The pain in her leg was intense, but she knew she couldn't waste time. She had to find shelter, food, and water before the dangers of this world caught up to her. Earth's wildlife was unlike anything she had ever seen. Huge, predatory creatures that hunted in the thick forest. And that was only the beginning of her problems. The alien girl limped through the dense underbrush, using the trees for support. Every step felt like an eternity, but she pushed through the pain. The thick foliage and constant rustling of leaves made it hard to tell what dangers lay ahead. She could hear strange sounds, creatures growling and calling to each other, echoing through the trees. Her senses were on high alert, every movement setting her nerves on edge. The alien girl's heart skipped a beat when she heard something large moving nearby. She froze, her breath coming out in short, shallow gasps. The sound was heavy, like something big, something dangerous. Her mind raced. Was it a predator? A beast that had sensed her presence? She couldn't afford to be caught. Her eyes darted around the forest, but all she could see were trees, thick and green, the shadows hiding whatever might be lurking in the dark. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. She could hear the leaves crunching underfoot. The girl's breathing became more frantic. She tried to move quietly, to hide, but her leg gave out from the strain. She fell to the ground with a grunt. For a moment, everything was still. She lay there, heart pounding, hoping that whatever was out there hadn't noticed her. But the silence didn't last long. A low growl echoed through the air, followed by the sound of something heavy moving toward her. She had no choice. She scrambled to her feet again, ignoring the pain. Her alien reflexes kicked in, and she moved with the speed and agility of a predator. She darted between trees, using the dense forest to hide her movements. She didn't look back. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat, the adrenaline pumping through her veins. Her mind was focused solely on survival. She couldn't afford to panic. She had to think clearly, to outsmart whatever was chasing her. The girl didn't know what it was, but she could feel the threat looming behind her. It was only a matter of time before it caught up.